Buenos días.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, shareholders. On behalf of the Board of Directors, which I have the honor of chairing, and on my own behalf, I would like to thank you for attending here, both those who are physically present in this room and those who are attending online. And I welcome you to this ordinary general shareholders meeting of Acerinox Next. And in accordance with the provisions of the Acerinox General Shareholders Meeting regulations, I will first verify compliance with the legal and statutory requirements for the valid constitution of the general shareholders, and therefore I will give the floor to the Secretary of the Board of Directors. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear shareholders. As the chairman of this general meeting has stated, it's now time to check that the legal and statutory requirements for the valid constitution of this meeting have been met. The general meeting is held on second call as an ordinary meeting, and in accordance with the Article 15 of the Articles of Association and Article 10 of the regulations of this general meeting, it is chaired by the chairman of the Board of Directors of the company, Carlos Ortega Arias Paz, assisted by the Secretary of the Board of Directors, myself, and the presiding board is composed of the chairman and secretary, and also the CEO, Bernardo Velázquez Herreros, and the following directors: Rosa María García Piñeiro, Laura González Molero, Francisco Javier García Sanz, Tomás Evia Armengol, Leticia Iglesias Herraiz, George Donald Johnston, Ignacio Martín San Vicente, Marta Martínez Alonso, and Santos Martínez Conde and Gutiérrez Barquín. The above mentioned directors are present at this meeting and are present in this room. The call to this general shareholders meeting was resolved by the Board of Directors at its meeting held on the 12th of April 2023, and the notice of this meeting was published on the 14th of April 2023 on the website of the Spanish Securities and Exchange Commission, the CNMV, by means of a notice of all the relevant information in the Central Companies Registry Bulletin, BURME, number 71 in the newspaper Expansión, and on the company's website. The agenda of the meeting is as included in the call notice of the meeting and is taken as read. The information relating to this general meeting has been available to all the shareholders at the registered office and on the company's website without interruption from the time it was published. The notice of call was published in accordance with the provisions of articles of the Capital Companies Act and the regulations of the General Meeting. The Board of Directors, in accordance with the provisions of Articles 203 of the Capital Companies Act and 10 of the regulations of this General Meeting, has agreed to request the presence of the Notary Public of Madrid Notarial Association, Ana López Moniz Gallego. She is present here in the room to take the minutes of this General Meeting. On behalf of the chairman, I will now like to report on the provisional attendance figures for the purpose of verifying the valid constitution of this general meeting. In absence of all the attendance cards being counted, we have sufficient provisional quorum to commence this general meeting of shareholders. We have here in online as well as on site 408 shareholders holding 20,479,862, corresponding 7% of the share capital. Represented here, we have 1,200 shareholders, representing 100 to 120 million shares, representing 46.1%. In agreement with this, the representation is 35,192,491 euros, represented by 140,360,140 369,966, corresponding to 34.2%. So this meets the requirements of the Article 13 of the Articles of Association, Article 9 of the meeting regulations, and of course, as agreed in the Capital Companies Act, for the valid constitution of the General Meeting of Shareholders on this second call. The final attendance figures for this General Meeting will be provided prior to the reading of the proposed resolutions on the agenda, which will then be put to the vote. Thank you, Luis. In view of the fact that, by virtue of the information provided by the Secretary, sufficient representation of the share capital is in attendance, I declare this General Meeting validly constituted on second call to discuss and resolve on all the items on the agenda submitted to vote. In accordance with the provisions of the regulations of the commercial registry, the notary will then ask the meeting whether there were any reservations or objections regarding the statements on the number of shareholders present and the capital here in attendance. In compliance with the provisions of Article 101 of the regulations of the Commercial Registry and 11.3 of the regulations, I hereby declare that I've been requested to attend this General Meeting of Shareholders and take the minutes of this meeting. I have assessed the capacity of the requester and verified that the meeting has been convened in accordance with the legal and statutory requirements. It falls to me to ask whether any shareholder wishes to make any reservation or objection on the statements regarding the number of shareholders present in the room and the capital present in the room. If there is any shareholder or proxy representative who wishes to register a reservation or objection regarding the valid constitution of this General Meeting or the overall details on the list of attendees, please do so. In case of attendees here present in the room, or if it's the case of those attending online, do so via the link available on the telematic assistance platform set on the website in order to record the reservation or objection in writing, thus we can include them in the minutes. Thank you, Madam Notary. I will now give the floor to the Secretary. In accordance with the provisions of the regulation of the General Shareholders Meeting, the shareholders or their proxies attending online telematically and wish to speak and, where appropriate, request information or clarification on any item on the agenda, on the information accessible to the public that the company has provided to the CNMV, the Spanish Securities and Exchange Commission, since the last General Meeting, and on the auditor's report, or make proposals in legally permitted cases, they have been able to do so from their link, using the link of the telematic assistance platform available on the website until 11:45 a.m. today. Likewise, if there is any shareholder or proxy present in this room who wishes to speak, he or she may go to this until we start with the different interventions. They can come here in the front of this auditorium so that they can leave this in the minutes in order to be recorded properly. Please identify yourself with your national ID and attendance card to the staff in charge of facilitating access to the intervention, indicating the number of shares you hold and whether you are the holder of the shares or whether you are acting as a proxy. In addition, if any of the shareholders or proxies present in the room wish to have their intervention recorded verbatim in the minutes of the General Meeting, they must send it in writing when requesting their turn to speak so that it can be collected when their intervention takes place. I also would like to inform you about that all the interventions made will be answered either verbally during this General Meeting or in writing within a time frame of 7 days after this General Meeting, in compliance with Article 197.2 of the Capital Companies Act and Article 5b(2) of the meeting regulations. On the other hand, It's reminded that given that the proposed resolutions formulated by the Board of Directors have been made available and published on the company's website, those shareholders who have previously registered and connected through the telematic assistance platform and wish to cast their vote in relation to any of the resolutions relating to the items on the agenda may continue to do so through the link on the telematic assistance platform set up for this purpose on the corporate website until, after reading the summary of the proposed resolutions, the chairman declares that the voting period has ended. At the same time, those shareholders or proxies who wish to vote against or abstain regarding any of the proposed resolutions, they can communicate it using, right at this point, telling so to the notary, identifying themselves properly, and saying if they are shareholders or proxies. Next, we will listen to Carlos Ortega Arias Paz as in his quality of chairman of the board of directors. Thank you, Luis. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning again, and thanks to all of you for attending this general meeting of shareholders of Acerinox. It's an honor. It's a great pride and an immense responsibility to address you as first time as a chairman of this company. I can ensure that I will develop my task with humbleness and effort, giving my best with all my experience after all these years to make Acerinox a reference in the stainless steel and high performance alloys market. The journey of the company should continue to improve efficiency and profitability to make it a more attractive company. And this line is where I will focus my effort. The bar is set high when I receive the baton from the magnificent professional person and an example of values such as Rafael Miranda, who in his farewell letter said that we wanted to create Acerinox as a stronger, more modern, and more agile company with a better range of products, with productive and more efficient systems and processes, and with a digital transformation project ongoing. Additionally, this is a paradigm of circular economy with a very ambitious sustainability agenda. Acerinox is a Spanish company, yes, but it is also very American and international, and it's consolidated as a global company and the most global company in this sector in the stainless steel and special alloys market, keeping its leadership in the stainless steel market in the US, which is a very relevant market. We find ourselves in a context of constant geopolitical instability, which forces us to make a great effort in terms of management, and we expect to come up out of it reinforced. Last year, 2022, was an example of it. It was full of challenges, and it was marked because of the Russian invasion in the Ukraine and the increase of inflation in most of the main economies worldwide. Let us not forget that the war conflict in Ukraine is the first large-scale war in Europe after the Second World War. The geopolitical complications due to this invasion meant severe sanctions from the Western countries to Russian products and serious logistical and supply problems in international chains. It all had a significant impact in the prices of energy, as we know, especially in Europe, where the prices of gas and electricity reached record figures. Despite its now moderating, inflation and the energy prices, especially in Spain, continue to be at high levels, and they represent a challenge which, again, we will have to face, and I'm sure we will be able to do so successfully. In this context, there is a process of regionalization in this industry. The disruptions in the supply chain during the pandemic, together with the difficulties generated by the war, plus the trade defense measures enforced in the areas with the highest turnover of our company, will deduct attractiveness to the imports. This should favor local production in markets where Acerinox has production plants and a consolidated business, which will benefit our activity in the next few years. Allow me to mention now the magnificent results obtained by the company in this year, 2022. last year, I mean. We can feel really proud and satisfied because they have been the best of the company in terms of turnover, EBITDA, and shareholder remuneration. Acerinox is in a great moment, and its activity should benefit in the next few years from a foreseeable increase in the demand, and also because of the process of regionalization that I just described. You shouldn't have any doubts that Acerinox is more than ready in this market context to show its robustness, thanks to a great extent to the intense work carried out in these last years. In fact, we have a differential value, the competitive advantage of having factories in several continents, the largest commercial network in the market, the diversification of our wide range of products, and the deep know-how or knowledge of our employees. These are all assets that make a difference. Even though we do not want to stay there, we want to continue modernizing our systems, processes, structures, and the different channels of the company. However, these large results have met a bad behavior globally of the main stock exchange index, without Acerinox being any exception. 2022 ended with generalized drops in the main markets, stock exchange markets, due to geopolitical uncertainties, increase of inflation in the US and Europe, the increase of energy costs, especially in this last one, and a lower outlooks or growth outlooks in Western economies with more restrictive monetary policies. In fact, in the US, as we all know, the Fed increased the interest rates 7 times, and the European central banks also increased the interest rates for the first time in years to combat inflation. These all caused drops in the main markets. After achieving peaks in 2021, in the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq 100 in the US recorded reductions of 19% and 33% respectively. Both indices were impacted because of their exposure to technology companies, tech companies that suffered important reductions in their valuations due to the higher interest rates. These European indexes continue to be in line with a drop of 12% of DAX in Germany or 10% of the CAC in France. In Spain, the IBEX 35 had a more moderate behavior versus other European stock exchanges, but there is a high exposure to financial sector, which is one of the few sectors that could benefit from this increase in interest rates. The shares of Acerinox, as I said, also were impacted. We couldn't make it to see these great results described reflected in the price of the share. We are working for this to change because we consider that we are in significantly lower multiples as the ones Acerinox deserves. Personally, we are surprised that the value of our securities doesn't reflect the strengths in Acerinox. We are the most international company for stainless steel. We are the first company around the world in high-performance alloys, and we are also leading in stainless steel market in the US, a market that continues to have behavior and profitability that are much higher than in the rest of the regions where Acerinox has a wide market share. However, our share doesn't reflect our true intrinsic value. As you know, the share of our company reached in January its maximum peak in 12.8 euros, and the minimum 10 months after that, on the 12th of October, with 7.9 euros. Despite we had the best results of history in 2021, which were widely overcome in 2022, and the permanent increase in prices that we have been implemented in our products, and the good prospects regarding the results for 2022 after having very good results in the first half, Acerinox closed and fell to 9.2 euros per share, which represents a drop in the price of the share of 19%. Today, the share is around 10 euros, which entails an improvement, but it's still insufficient. I am convinced that the situation of the valuation of Acerinox shares will correct because it is an anomaly in the market.
And this is why we have continued to thank this through a solid retribution to shareholders, to those who have kept their trust on Acerinox. During the year 2022, the company allocated a total of 336 million euros to paying their shareholders between the dividends and share buybacks. This amount had more than doubles the previous one because it's 132% above that of 2021, and it entails a payout of 60%. As you know, we proceeded to perform a cash payment at 0.50 euros per share, and we did two share buyback programs. Additionally, we approved a new shareholder remuneration policy. In this context, we proposed an increase in the ordinary dividend to 0.60 euros per share, a dividend that will be stable in its total amount and therefore will grow as we amortize the shares acquired through the share buyback program. If the general shareholders meeting finally approves the increase of the ordinary dividend to 0.60 euros per share gross, the retribution in the form of dividend, ordinary dividend, will have increased to 33% in the last 4 years. As a general rule, the dividend will be paid out in two payments. A payment that will be made in January plus a complementary payment in July. The group already approved a payment of the dividend in the year 2022 amounting to 0.30 euros per share on the past 27th of January. In addition, and as the market conditions allow for it, and also the evolution of the results of the corporation, and third, if the net debt doesn't exceed 1.2 times EBITDA, the average EBITDA of the cycle, the board will agree to pay the shareholders through the different buyback programs and the payment of dividends, extraordinary dividends, as part of the authorizations agreed by the general shareholders meeting. Allow me to also refer to the work undertaken by the board of directors and its committees. They have held 50 meetings over the 15 sessions held by the board and the 35 undertaken by the committees. To set the backdrop, these meetings amount to an increase of about 20% compared to previous years when we held 42 sessions. And we have actually doubled the activity of 2017 where we held 24 sessions, but the Sustainability Committee was not in place there. So I cannot, of course, let go of the opportunity to thank the members of the board, specifically the presidents of the committee, Doña Leticia Iglesias, Ms. Laura Molero, and Ms. Rosa Garcia, and also the General Secretary, Mr. Luis Jimeno, who attends every single session. And I'd like to thank them for the effort that they have done in this regard. Amongst the most significant governance activities, I'd like to highlight the creation of the role of the coordinating board member, whose appointment and responsibility was in the hands of Mr. Donald Johnston. Thank you, Don. Finally, I'd also like to thank Mr. Ignacio Martin for his dedication and great added value and the deliberations of the board over the course of this year. As you know, Ignacio has decided to not continue to be with us as a director, and we will miss you. I don't want to close this speech without talking about our commitment with sustainability. Sustainability has become a driver to support the group's strategy, and we must understand it as an element that generates competitive advantage and an opportunity to grow the business. Therefore, the company has reinforced its commitment towards people, the society, and the planet through a series, a great amount of initiatives that generate long-term value. The Positive Impact Plan 360 structures the main initiatives of the group around the environmental, social, and corporate government levels, placing the focus on the most important aspects for our activity. And I suggest that you read the integrated report where these initiatives are portrayed. I'd like to highlight that the activity of the Acerinox groups contributes to creating a sustainable future, minimizing the impact on the environment, because we create a product that has a very long useful life and can be recycled endlessly. In addition, the main raw material scrap involves a 90 90% of the materials are recycled. Therefore, the products that the group manufacture are referenced in circular economy and essential in the energy transition. Therefore, this is an opportunity to create a new productive model based on sustainable development. This company is also committed towards diversity, equality, and equity amongst our employees and collaborators, including, amongst other aspects, gender diversity, race diversity, or religious belief. And there's no greater evidence of this than the fact that we operate in 64 countries with different cultures and religions, and across 5 continents, with sales in more than 80 countries. We're increasing the opportunities for growth and training of those who work at Acerinox. Just for you to get a flavor, more than 6,000 of our more than 8,200 employees receive in 2022, more than 500,000 hours in training. We are also fostering collaboration with universities, technical centers, and training schools, convinced of the need to attract and develop talent. Almost 1,500 students attended one of the 37 courses that Acerinox taught in the different Spanish universities. I'd like to once again reiterate our gratitude and my own personal gratitude for the trust that you have deposited on Acerinox. You as shareholders, investors, providers, customers, and friends. On behalf of the board of directors, I'd also like to thank all employees and collaborators of our company for their effort, professionalism, and commitment. As I have mentioned, there's important challenges ahead that we will overcome to make this company grow, thanks to the commitment of everyone and because of how excited we are to continue to have Acerinox as a global reference in the stainless steel sector and high performance alloys too. Thank you very much. Now we will give the floor to Mr. Fernando Velázquez, the CEO of this company. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, shareholders, good morning to you all. Thank you once again for joining us at this Acerinox General Shareholders Meeting on this occasion, the one that corresponds to the financial year 2022. Once again, I have the honor of addressing you to render an account of the results obtained by the company in the past financial year and to thank you for the trust placed on the Acerinox management team. As our chairman mentioned in his speech, we would like to explain how the company has performed over a financial year that was a great challenge because of the very complex context in which we had to operate. There were circumstances that made our management very difficult, but in spite of that, we got to the greatest turnover figure in our history, 8.6 billion, also generating an EBITDA of 1.2 billion. I'd like to begin by highlighting the fact that thanks to this exceptional results, we have allocated to remunerate our shareholders a very important remuneration, taking into account the sum allocated to dividends and share buybacks, and also our retribution policy that we want to continue to push, as the President mentioned. And in addition, the board has decided to propose an increase of the ordinary dividend of 0.60 euros per share, an increase of 20%. And this is something that we do in response to the great expectations and the trust that we have in our business model and our strategy. To explain the circumstances in which this magnificent results have been achieved, I would like to recall the starting situation, which we detailed in this very report 1 year ago. After 2 years of declining demand for stainless steel in the main markets in the last few years, and the situation that we had to undergo because of the pandemic in 2020, stainless steel's inventories were at a minimum, and also the inventories of industrial equipment and consumer goods incorporated that form our materials, something that can be made extensive to a good number of industrial products. The subsequent strong recovery, which began at the end of 2020 and was especially intense during the 2021 financial year, boosted consumption at all levels of the supply chain, even more so at the beginning of the chain, where our activity is located due to the amplifying effect. This enabled Acerinox to achieve that year, in 2021, the year's best results since its founding, which have been surpassed again in 2021. Tailwinds continue to drive our activity during the first 2 quarters, in spite of the unfortunate invasion of Ukraine, which, although created several uncertainties in the economy, did not manage to stop at first the inertia of the expansionary phase in which we found ourselves. Only the sharp rise of inflation, largely due to the higher energy prices and the reaction of central banks raising interest rates a few months later, led to a change in sentiment in our sector with the shadow of recession spreading across the markets. We are confident that the good decisions of the central banks and the experience accumulated over the past few years will allow to re-steer the economy into a new, more moderate phase, and that little by little normality will be restored with a return to less pronounced and more predictable economic cycles. The consequences of this macroeconomic framework that I have just described on a cyclical business such as that of stainless steel can be clearly explained if we differentiate real consumption and the apparent consumption of our products. The sales of stainless steel manufacturers are divided almost equally into two large groups: the end consumer and the distribution. The former includes industrial companies that use our materials as raw materials and which, because of their higher consumption, buy directly from manufacturers. This includes chiefly household appliance manufacturers, those that manufacture exhaust systems for the automotive industry, industrial refrigeration equipment manufacturers, furniture and kitchen equipment, and chemical or food storage tanks, amongst others. Of course, their purchases varying with the economic cycles, but more or less in line with the ups and downs of this in a more moderate way. This is not the case in the stainless steel distribution sector, which is not driven so much by actual consumption, but rather by consumption expectations, as they must anticipate purchases by trying to foresee the evolution of real demand in order to be able to meet it with their inventories. This is what we understand to be apparent consumption, which includes both actual or real consumption and stock variations in warehouses. As in many other markets, this management of expectations tends to amplify cycles as purchases are reduced in times of uncertainty, just as more is purchased than necessary when higher consumption is expected in order to increase inventories and to respond to better sales forecasts. The latter is precisely what has happened throughout 2021 and the first part of 2022. Overflowing optimism in the good progress of consumption boosted purchases and caused all factories in Europe and the United States to work at full pace, even creating a feeling of supply shortages that attracted a significant increase in imports from Asia. Therefore, the 2022 final year thus had two different halves. While the tailwind lasted, we were able to take advantage of the strength of the market to achieve during the first half of 2022 the best partial results in our history, taking advantage of the increased competitiveness achieved during the last few years. Although the momentum of the business allowed us to enjoy this bonanza until the middle of the year, already in the months of March and April, it was announced that the change was going to take place with an increase in rates. These measures had an impact on steel distributors. Inventories, which had been low earlier, that were now excessive for the new cycle ahead. And in addition, we had imported materials with a delivery period which was extended up to 5 months later, making it difficult to correct inventories quickly. And there was an overreaction that led to a reduction of the factory activity to a minimum. On the other side of the world, this process was also supported by the consequence of China's zero COVID policy, which slowed consumption but not steel manufacturing, accumulating large amounts of stocks in warehouses and resulting in the availability of large volumes of materials at low prices and with fast delivery at a time when the markets could no longer absorb them. And this is how we faced the second half of the year, reducing activities in our factories to keep our inventories and working capital at moderate levels, and with tremendous pressure to lower prices, which reached historic lows in Europe, deteriorated by the strong influx of imports. Once again, the need for trade defense measures in Europe to prevent unfair trade was highlighted, since the system of safeguard measures, although necessary, only works adequately in times of market growth. While the situation in the United States is very similar, the 25% protection of Section 232 made it possible to face change with less abruptness, adapting production to normalize inventories, which were also high, but maintaining prices at a reasonable level. In order to illustrate the situation, it's worth mentioning that apparent consumption remained flat in Europe in 2022 and decreased by 5% in the United States, while imports grew by 34% and 29% respectively. Already in 2023, the correction of inventories is coming to an end after a 30% decline in apparent consumption in the United States and 33% in Europe, and imports have now returned to normal levels. The situation of high-performance alloy markets where VDM is active was very different because projects were materialized that had been delayed, especially in the oil and gas industry, power generation, and chemical sectors, therefore not dependent on distribution markets. The strength of demand for these materials enabled us to build up a solid order backlog and improve our results. We are convinced that the experience accumulated by Acerinox's management team throughout the numerous crises suffered over the course of the past few years has contributed in a decided manner to minimize the damage by making sensible and timely decisions, thus preventing a march-rate deterioration that allowed us to set records in turnover figures in 2022, hitting records in turnover, EBITDA, and shareholder remuneration, amongst others. If it wasn't the case with net profit, it was because the principles of accounted prudence led us to impair the value of the investment in Malaysia by 204 million euros due to strong competition in the region. The same principles also made us carry out an adjustment in inventories amounting to 98 million euros. This and other measures are helping us face 2023 with a greater peace of mind. In a cyclical business with increasing volatility, it is important to keep under control working capital and debt, which continue to be reduced during the course of the financial year by 138 million euros, presented on the 31st of December, net financial debt, which is only 35 times our EBITDA. After making payments for investments amounting to 126 million euros and allocating the aforementioned amount of 336 million to shareholder remuneration. Unfortunately, Acerinox's good health is not being reflected on the share price, which ended up at 9.24 euros per share and a market capitalization of 2.4 billion euros, only 1.88 times the EBITDA generated. We hope markets will recognize the value that our company has created and will start generating cash once the economic uncertainties have been dispelled and the appetite for European industrial sector increases, which has been somewhat neglected by the investor community of the past decade. We are convinced that the events of recent times, from the pandemic to a war on the doorstep of Europe and the disruption suffered by supply chains, highlight the strategic need for closer and more diversified sources of supply that guarantee the continuity of industrial activity, which is crucial to allow a certain degree of autonomy and independence vis-a-vis other economic powers. This phenomenon, in addition, will have a positive consequence in terms of sustainability, improving the overall impact of the activity with respect to Scope 3 emissions, as the sources of supply are closer to production centers, and helps also avoid or reduce emissions caused by transportation. This new model of new reindustrialization of large areas in which we operate, which we have been advocating for years, should give back the industry the weight it deserves in the strategy of Western countries to provide independence, growth, and quality of employment. This has been clearly seen in the United States, and in Europe it seems like we're waking up to the new situation. We do not believe that this is the end of globalization, but rather a process of diversification and regionalization that will undoubtedly benefit our business and that of our customers. This is how it should be if, in addition, we seek sustainable development in which the responsible industry and the circular economy must play an essential role and be recognized by society. This is how we understand it at Acerinox, where we are clearly committed to this vision from several fronts. On the one hand, improving our efficiency to optimize the use of resources in the manufacture of our products, which we have been promoting through our Excellence 360 plans for more than a decade, and to which we are now adding the advantages of digital transformation. And down. On the other hand, we will be maximizing the use of scrap and other recycled materials as raw materials. We have reached more than 90%, which has placed us among the largest recycles in our country. To produce extraordinary materials, stainless steel, which is durable, fully and infinitively recyclable without losing due to it any of its defining characteristics of resistance to corrosion, durability, mechanical strength, ease of cleaning, low maintenance, amongst many others.
This means we are circular economy. These principles are reflected in our sustainability objectives with the 2030 vision and are embodied in our Positive Impact 360 plan, which responds to one of the main pillars of the group's strategy. In addition to the use of recycled materials for the manufacture of stainless steel and high-performance alloys, we can see there's a reduction of CO2 emissions, the reduction of water consumption, the increase of diversity in the group, and the eradication of accidents in our facilities. They all stand out. In this sense, we can highlight the reduction of 28% of the accident rate compared to the data for 2021. Another very important milestone during the year was the achievement of the Platinum distinction, the highest distinction awarded by the independent EcoVadis platform that evaluates sustainability in global supply chains. With this rating, Acerinox is among the top 1% of the best-rated companies out of more than 100,000 companies evaluated from more than 200 countries. Out of all these milestones and Acerinox performance in terms of sustainability, you will have very detailed information in our 2022 annual report. Our contribution in this area has also been recently recognized once again with the World Sustainability Awards held in Brussels on 11th of May, where Acerinox Europe won the gold medal in sustainability category, while a bronze medal in this category went to our Malaysian plant in Baru Steel. As for safety, which is our top priority, the gold medal went to Baru Stainless, while the bronze medal went to our US plant, North American Stainless. The sharp increase in our adaptation in our different factories made our production results were not in line with it. The total steel works was lower than reported in 2021. In these last few years, the increase in the prices in energy prices in Europe are now more and more relevant. This increase has affected the different groups of the factory, but mainly in Spain. The prices continued to increase during 2022, when they were affected by Russian invasion of Ukraine and the international blockades. The increase in energy prices only in the Acerinox Euro plant in Campo de Gibraltar, which was the most affected, has meant an increase in cost compared to those of last year of 136 million euros, which are added to the 83 million that were already reported in overcost in 2021 financial year. These cost overruns are higher than those of our European competitors, and they are certainly far higher than those of other regions in the world, because our business was severely hampered, forcing us to stop our operations on several occasions and to have a temporary layoff plan. I must remind you that the problem of energy prices for the intensive industry is a European problem, but mainly it is a Spanish problem that hampers the competitiveness of the industry in our country. We've been denouncing this disadvantage for many years, but in recent years it's become unsustainable. Without a firm commitment to large industry intensive in electricity and gas consumption, as is the case of other countries in our environment, the strategic autonomy, independence by our leaders will be unfeasible. On another note, I would like to highlight the versatility achieved in our South African factory in Columbus Stainless, to produce both in the same facility, both stainless and carbon steel, which makes us more stable and less dependent on export markets. This has contributed to our results. Without a doubt, our great result obtained wouldn't have been possible without the contribution of our Kentucky mill, North American Stainless, which is established as a market leader not only in the United States but also in the whole of North America. I must thank the good work carried out by the people who make this success possible, as well as the trust placed in us by our customers who see in our American company their commercial partner of reference. The trust, confidence in this market and our good position encouraged us to study a new investment already approved at the beginning of 2023 of $244 million that allowed us to increase our production in the American factory by up to 20% in 3 years through the purchase of equipment that will process the higher headboard productions obtained thanks to the increase in productivity and efficiency that will be achieved thanks to the application of digital solutions to traditional techniques. An important technological achievement that will be reflected in the high profitability of this investment. Finally, it is worth highlighting the wisdom of the purchase and the good performance of the German company VDM Metals, a world leader in the manufacture of high-performance alloys. After only 3 years since the acquisition, we can state that VDM and its people are fully integrated in the group's organization, contributing significantly to Acerinox results. In the year 2022, Acerinox has reached new historical records in both production as well as results. We have intensified the collaboration between the stainless steel and alloy factories, improving productivities and increasing the range of products, which has made us one of the manufacturers with the widest range of solutions with advanced materials in the world. The synergies achieved in 2023 of 25.4 million exceeded the targets for the year by 52%, and the collaboration between the commercial teams has enabled us to expand our customer base by more than 100 customers. We continue to explore this market, searching more organic and inorganic possibilities for growth. However, despite the excellent results, we cannot say that 2022 was an easy year to manage. We have suffered the effects of the invasion in Ukraine. I would like to mention in this section that Acerinox has very diversified sources of supply following our strategy for responsible purchasing, and we have managed to avoid procurement, and we've managed to avoid shortages in our supplies while eliminating dependence on raw materials from Russian origin, with the aim of sourcing them only from countries that respect human rights and international legality. We've also had to deal with the collapse and intervention of the London Metal Exchange, which prevented the normal pricing on both raw materials and finished products during the months of March and April. We've suffered frequent power outages in South Africa and have seen the floods in this country hindered the shipment of our goods. We have suffered carrier strikes in Spain. In short, we've been able to overcome a large number of unforeseen situations successfully thanks to the good risk management perfected over the past few years, incorporating uncertainty, flexibility, and responsiveness into our daily management. Of course, the overcoming of all these difficulties was only possible thanks to the professionalism and the effort of all those who are part of Acerinox. These are 8,200 people who fill and live this group. This year, again, I must express my admiration and gratitude for their capacity and dedication that helped us to achieve these exceptional results. I can only feel privileged to continue working for this great company, which continues to improve year after year thanks to the good work and involvement of all the people who make it up. I am especially grateful to the management and to all my closest collaborators around the world for their great support in overcoming all these difficulties. The good harmony between all of us, the experience and professionalism of the team facilitate my work enormously. I am convinced that we are heading towards a new economic order that will give back to the industry an essential role in Europe and the United States, and that will favor our activity. We will not miss this opportunity for which we have been preparing for years, having provided our organization with a better and more agile governance structure focused on satisfying all our stakeholders. We're committed to continue working to improve and achieve greater results that will repay our shareholders for the trust they have placed in this team and bring them new joys. I conclude my message by reiterating my thanks to all those who make our work possible, customers, suppliers, and above all our shareholders for their support and trust, which motivates us and encourages us. All of them will continue to find in Acerinox a responsible ally to count on. The company is ready and maintains the strength and capacity to move forward with the same spirit and ambition that's always characterized it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bernardo. Now we will open up the intervention of the shareholders, and for this I will give the floor to the secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My colleagues have said that there is no intervention online, so we can now start with the interventions from the shareholders who are present here in the room. To facilitate this process, we would like to remind you that if you want to speak, you should come here to the ladder and say the number of shares that you are holder of or representing. And if you want this text to be recorded in the minutes, you should leave us the text. For the preparation of all the interventions, this needs some time, and meanwhile we would like to show you a video about circular economy.
Esta cúpula está recubierta de acero inoxidable. Lleva más de 90 años soportando fuertes vientos, tormentas, heladas, altas temperaturas, contaminación. A pesar de ello, todavía tendrán que pasar muchísimos años antes de que sufra deterioro. Tantos que ni siquiera sabemos cuántos. Lo que sí sabemos es que el día que esta cúpula no sea necesaria, no se convertirá en un desecho, sino en muchas otras cosas. Es más, puede que algún día ese mismo acero, reciclado cientos de veces, vuelva a convertirse en otra cúpula, o quizás en un puente, o en un túnel. Y es que la materia prima de Acerinox no sale de aquí. Ni de aquí, ni de aquí. Sale de aquí. Más del 90% de nuestra materia prima es material reciclado, fundamentalmente chatarra. Valiosa materia prima. Además, en los últimos años hemos conseguido reducir drásticamente la energía necesaria para su fundición. Y una vez más, gracias a un proceso de reconversión y transformación, el mismo acero inoxidable que diera vida a cúpulas, túneles y puentes vuelve a formar estructuras resistentes y duraderas sin perder ninguna de sus propiedades, calidad o resistencia. A este modelo de producción sostenible se le conoce como economía circular. En otras palabras, Acerinox cuenta con un producto limpio, resistente, duradero y eternamente reciclable, capaz de mejorar la calidad de vida de las personas minimizando el impacto en el medio ambiente. Pero nuestro producto es, además de un referente de economía circular, un valor imprescindible en el camino hacia una transición energética y un material clave en la creación de un futuro sostenible. Con todo, en Acerinox no nos conformamos. Seguimos dando pasos firmes hacia un producto más sostenible, gracias a una trazabilidad más minuciosa en todos nuestros procesos y a la implementación de avances en la producción que reducen progresivamente las emisiones de CO2 y utilizan cada vez más energía limpia. Es así como podremos fundir y fabricar acero inoxidable y aleaciones de alto rendimiento durante muchísimos años más, aportando valor a la economía circular de nuestros clientes, nuestros proveedores y respetando los límites del planeta.
All right, I have been told that 2 shareholders present in the room have requested to speak. So if you are so kind to come here to the ladder so that the Acerinox staff can assist you.
Del barrio Colmenarejo.
Mr. Barrio Colmenarejo with ID representing the society, Pedro. He owns 1,000 shares.
Señor presidente,
Mr. Chairman, directors, top management, and all the employees who are part of Acerinox SA. I cannot miss this opportunity today in our general shareholders meeting to congratulate you for your great work and commitment carried out this year, 2022, which has generated a great profit of 556 million euros, in line with the profits achieved in 2021, but you've achieved a turnover of 8.6 billion, which is the highest in the records of the company, founded so many years ago. In the year 2021 and this last year, 2022, have been the best in terms of results for the companies and the stock exchange. But I would like to encourage you to continue in the same line of results for the next few years, and I would like to request a round of applause for all of you.
señor presidente,
Mr. Chairman, despite Acerinox in 2021 achieved the best levels of profits, 572 million, and this year the turnover is the highest ever with 8.6 billion. We are speaking about record figures. This has not been transferred into the capitalization of the company in the stock exchange as in other years. We continue to make the journey going from 8 euros to 12.5 euros. And we have been so, and I can tell you this, 9 years. Specifically since 2015, where the share was listed at 15 euros. Mr. Bernardo Velázquez, I would like to convey you the question that year after year I've asked to Mr. Rafael Miranda. Why is Acerinox share, when we are approaching the 12.5 level, comes back to the beginning around 9.5, 10? This is something you know, and this has happened several times, many times. I know that you do not have the crystal ball, but I think you know the answer. Maybe you can tell the answer because Mr. Miranda didn't. Mr. Chairman, are you aware that having the capitalization of Acerinox low, at a low level, can present a takeover bid possibility by a competitor in the same sector, where we spoke about marriage at some point, and where the premium offered by this, due to the low level of value of Acerinox, will not be enough to cover the problems that we have in our investments by the shareholders? Mr. Chairman, can you please study for this year 2023 or for 2024 a share buyback and a redemption of shares when the share is low that could help for the capitalization of the company upwards in the stock exchange? Mr. Chairman, 2021 and this year 2022 have been the years where the profits of Acerinox have gone up. So I would kindly ask you to study an increase of the dividend up to 0.75 euros per share that will help us to buffer the problems we have in our investments. And apart from the congratulations in the beginning, I would like to specifically congratulate Mr. Arias. I would like you to offer some snacks after the general meeting of shareholders. And, well, if you do not offer this kind of snacks to all the participants here, I will think you're a bit greedy. There are no parking spaces. There's nothing for the shareholders. So please provide some parking spaces because there's a lot of space for us to come here and park our cars. Thank you.
A continuación, interviene don
Afterwards, we will give the floor to Mr. Damián García Bartolomé, DNI 0348616T, who owns 300 shares himself, and he's also a proxy for another 300. Hello, good morning. I hope that you can hear me. Great then, good morning. I'd like to further emphasize the topic of the buybacks for amortization. As you have explained, you are considering this a remuneration to shareholders. Remuneration to shareholders is always done through the acquisition of our own shares, but this is also a business strategy for the company in this case, because there's a great difference, as you have explained, between the value and the price. When there's such a big difference between value and price, I said this is a business, a good business for the company itself, and also a remuneration to shareholders. So from this standpoint, I'd like to please ask you to consider this as a business for the company, as many other companies that are listed in the stock market, IBEX or outside of the IBEX, are doing. And the majority of them are perhaps not as rightly as we would, considering it as a business for the company and also a remuneration to shareholders. But because there is such a big difference between value and price, I think we are even more right in doing this than they would. And this is what I wanted to propose to you. Thank you very much.
Con esta última intervención finaliza el turno de preguntas.
And with this last intervention, we close the floor.
Muchas gracias, señores accionistas. Paso a contestar las preguntas.
Thank you very much, dear shareholders. I'd like to answer the questions that have been asked. Thanks to Mr. José Antonio del Barrio for taking the floor and for congratulating us for the results and the turnover achieved by this company. I think that we will want to continue along the same lines as we did last year in terms, the last few years, in terms of results, and also making the company go forward to continue to be leaders in the stainless steel market and also the high-performance alloy market too. All these wonderful results have been possibly reflected on the stock price. And we have been in the same range of the stock price in the last few years. And I hope that we go beyond that cap in the future, and I hope to achieve this. This is something that I've mentioned many times before. I think we are undervalued in the stock market, and we are working on it. We are using several levers to grow our value, and we really want the market to recognize our real value, which to me is not reflected on the current stock price, which is currently at 10 euros, and it should be way above there. About the takeover bids by competitors, we're open to any opportunities that create value for our stakeholders, investors by competitors, investments by shareholders, or organic growth opportunities that may arise, as has been mentioned by the CEO, according to investment that has been done in the United States, or inorganic growth, as happened, organic growth opportunities, as the one that we had with VDM, a wonderful company that has joined Acerinox, providing exceptional results. So if there's opportunities of this kind, hold no doubt as to the fact that we will go after them to improve the share value and value for our shareholders and the company at Acerinox. We will study buying back shares when the prices are low. We fully agree on that. As Mr. Ramón García Bartolomé mentioned, buying back our shares when the prices are low and the value is lower than the share price, that is an opportunity, not just for shareholders, but also for the company. The best investment in this case is buying back shares. But in answering to the two interventions made, I'd like to say that we will study additional buybacks, as has been mentioned before, and as has been published and approved in the new shareholder remuneration policy. We will study those options when market possibilities or conditions allow for it, and when we consider that this is positive for Acerinox, when we consider that organic and inorganic opportunities can be supported by this. And part of the capital needs to be attributed to increasing our stocks and working capital, and as long as net debt over EBITDA doesn't exceed 2 times because of the financial prudency criteria. Now, having said that, it's true that stocks are below their intrinsic value, and one of the great opportunities that we have is to buy back shares if the situation is adequate. About increasing the dividend to 0.75 euros per share, this is very interesting. We have just implemented a 20% increase on the ordinary dividend, plus the 2 buyback programs that have been executed over the course of 2022. We will continue to study the possibilities to increase our dividends. As we said, we will have a dividend of 0.60 euros per share on an annual basis, and the constant amount will remain. And with the different amortization of buybacks, the dividend per share will increase. I don't know whether we will reach 0.75, but I hope that we will continue to increase dividends per share. Now, about the cocktail, if you consider that I'm greedy, well, that's something that my wife always says. I'm a bit thrifty, but Acerinox isn't. In any case, we have a cost policy which dictates efficiency in everything that we do. If you consider that cocktails are suitable, we will consider that in future years. But now we need to be cautious in the way we go about our costs, and we need to display with our own behavior that policy of austerity that we want to have in place in Acerinox. So I'd like to thank you for the suggestion. And as for parking, unfortunately, we only had 12 parking spots in this venue. Next time, we will try and increase the amount of parking spaces. But for today, we only had 12 parking spots, so I apologize for the inconvenience. And about Mr. Juan Ramón García Bartolomé, I think I already shared my vision on the buyback of shares. I couldn't agree more. As you very rightly said, there's a big difference between value and price, and we will therefore seek future buyback opportunities in the future if we consider that the other avenues for organic and inorganic growth are not as good as the very buyback of shares. I hope I didn't leave anything untackled, but I'd like to thank both shareholders for their interventions. And now, on behalf of the President, we will tell you the final data on attendance, the final figures. They haven't really changed that much compared to the ones that we read before. Here in the room, we have 501 shareholders that own 20,239,835 shares that amount to 8.5% of the share capital. As we have 1,253 shareholders represented here that own 120,408,903 shares that equal 46.3% of the share capital. And in accordance to all this, the share capital that is present or represented and entitled to vote amounts to 35,411,957 euros, represented by 141 million shares. 141,647,948 shares. That amounts to 54.53% of the share capital. And these are final figures. The agreements that are put forth to the vote of the shareholders are those proposed by the Board of Directors with regard to different points in the agenda. The notice has been published in agreement with the legal provisions in the adequate media, and because it's known by you, we will consider it read if no one opposes to it. It is hereby stated that for the record that in this established period, no supplements to the notice of the extraordinary general meeting or alternative proposals for resolutions to those approved by the board of directors have been submitted by the shareholders. We would like to also inform you that voting on the resolutions proposed by the board of directors in relation to the items in the agenda will be counted by means of a negative deduction system. That means that votes in favor shall be deemed to those corresponding to all the shares present and represented at the meeting, and those shall be deducted as follows. First, votes corresponding to shares whose holders or proxy holders indicate that they vote against or abstain. Second, the votes corresponding to the shares whose holders have voted against or abstained prior to this general meeting through the means of communication online made available to the shareholders. And also votes corresponding to the shares whose holders or proxies have left the meeting prior to the vote on the proposed resolution in question and have recorded their express wish. Also, it is stated that a potential conflicts of interest in relation to any of the items of the agenda in which certain directors may find themselves in relation to the provisions of the Capital Companies Act have been taken into account. Given that the proposed resolutions are known to all and in view of their length, in accordance to the provisions of Article 11.5 of the Regulations of the General Shareholders Meeting, I will dispense with the full reading and proceed to a summary reading of the essential elements of the proposals. On the point first on the agenda, the meeting is asked to approve the annual accounts and the management report, both of the company as much as of its consolidated group, which have been duly audited for the financial year ended on the 31st of December 2022. Under item 2 on the agenda, the board is asked to approve the consolidated statement of non-financial information for the financial year 2022. Under point 3 of the agenda, the meeting is asked to approve the proposed application of Acerinox as a profit for the year ended in the 31st December 2022 as follows. Result of the year, 332,013,162 euros. Application, dividend distribution, 149,599,165 euros. Voluntary reserves, 413,999 euros. Under point 4 on the agenda, the meeting is asked to approve the management of the board of directors of the company on the financial year 2022. Under item 5 on the agenda, which has two sections, the general shareholders meeting is asked to approve the re-election appointment of directors, and under section 1, the meeting is asked to re-elect Mr. George Donald Johnston as independent director. Under point 5.2, where the meeting is asked to approve the appointment of Mr. Pedro Sainz de Barandarriba as independent director. Under point 6, the meeting is asked to approve the re-election of the auditors for Acerinox and its consolidated group for the financial year 2023. Under point 7 on the agenda, the meeting is asked to approve the share capital increase by means of cash contributions in one or more installments and at any time up to 32,465,543 euros. That is 50% within a period of 2 years from the time of this meeting, and the delegate has the possibility to exclude preemptive subscription rights up to a maximum of 10% of the share capital. Under point 8 in the agenda, the meeting is asked to approve a reduction in share capital through the redemption of 10,388,974 treasury shares from the share buyback program, which was approved by the board of directors and at its meeting of the 27th of July 2022, without the right of opposition by creditors and the consequent amendment of Article 5 or the Articles of Associations related related to share capital. On point 9 on the agenda, the meeting is asked to approve the authorization to the board of directors of the company for the acquisition of equity shares for a period of 2 years, either by itself or through any of the Acerinox Group companies. On point 10 on the agenda, the GSM is asked to vote on a consultative basis on the annual report on remuneration of directors of Acerinox for the year ended on the 31st of December 2022. Under item and 11th on the agenda, the GM's is asked to approve an amendment to a director's remuneration policy to be applied from the motivated approval consisting of the extension of the effects of the clawback clause to all variable remuneration executive directors. On the 12th point of the agenda, the approval of the we request the approval of the authorization to the board of directors of the company for the acquisition of up to 352,684 shares of Acerinox S.A. destined to the payment of the third cycle of the second pluriannual remuneration plan established in favor of the executive directors and the rest of the senior management of the Acerinox Group. In point 13 of the agenda, the approval of the authorization to the board of directors of the company for the acquisition of up to 449,906 shares of Acerinox S.A. to be used for the payment of the first pluriannual remuneration plan or long-term incentive plan addressed to the executive staff of Acerinox Group correspondent is submitted to the meeting. On point 14, we request the approval, if applicable, of the third multi-annual remuneration plan or long-term incentive plan for the period 2024-2028 addressed to the executive directors and the rest of the Acerinox Group senior management, consisting of the payment of a part of variable remuneration through the delivery of shares, and we also would be authorizing the board of directors of the company for the acquisition of up to 208,790 shares to be used for the payment of the first cycle. And we also want to, under point 15, to ask for approval to delegate powers of the board of directors to execute, rectify, and formalize the resolutions adopted by the meeting and to grant powers to notarize said resolutions. Under items 16 and 17 on the agenda, the chairman will explain the more relevant developments in corporate governance, sustainability, climate change of the company in accordance with the information contained in the company's annual corporate governance report for financial year 2022. Consolidated and corresponding to this year. Thank you, Luis. As I mentioned before, I'd like to very briefly explain several aspects regarding corporate governance that have changed and improved over the course of 2022. Initially, I'd like to refer to the aforementioned increase in shareholder remuneration from 0.5 to 0.6 euros per share as a result of the dividend policy approved in December of last year. The current share price, as you know, I do not think this reflects our true value, and this payment represents a return of over 6%. You can check this policy on our website, which, by the way, has been revamped a few weeks ago to coincide with the convening of this meeting. With this policy, we improve shareholder returns in two ways. First, by increasing the remuneration to 0.6 euros per share, which represents a 20% improvement compared to 2021. Secondly, we also intend to continue to keep the total amount constant paid to shareholders, even if the number of shares is reduced in the future as a result of the share buyback programs. Therefore, the same total amount of the ordinary dividend will be distributed amongst the smaller number of shares, increasing therefore the dividend per share. This policy will be kept as long as circumstances allow for it, as undoubtedly should be the case in coming years. We continue with the remuneration policy, and this time we refer to that of the Chief Executive Officer and the company's executives. This policy, which is submitted to a vote at this meeting, as has been mentioned by the Secretary, has introduced good corporate governance trends in line with suggestions made by some proxy advisors, and we also propose to increase the scope of the application of the clawback clause, which is a clause that makes it possible to demand the return of the amounts paid as variable payments if it's found afterwards that an excess payment has been made. As you will have seen in the remuneration report and in the proposed resolution on the agenda, this clause extends its effect to the variable remuneration, not only to the multi-year remuneration, which was already included. In addition, this measure will affect all members of the top management. An effort has also been requested to explain the different parameters that make up the Chief Executive Officer's remuneration parameters. In 2022, the remuneration report has included additional efforts to explain these parameters in greater detail so that we hope that it will be more understandable and transparent. I will now comment on the performance of different governing bodies and the new developments that have occurred during 2022. Initially, we have seen an increase in the number of meetings held, which was not decreased since time of the pandemic, and that has been maintained at almost 1 meeting per working week. This effort has also been spread over a smaller number of board members, since in the past we had 14 board members, and now we are at 11, which is more in line with IBEX 35. Continuing with the composition of the board, it should be noted that the 40% of members of the least represented gender on the board of directors has not yet been reached. However, the reduction in the number of board members has not affected the least represented gender, so in percentage terms, the presence of women on the board has increased.
The number of female board members at this time has increased to 50%. So right now, the number of non-executive board members is exactly 40%, 4 out of 10. In any case, the gender equality or balance, not only at the board of directors but at the different professional levels of the company, is a goal that our company is going for. The board and its different commissions have carried out its evaluation according to the internal services of our company, but keeping the metrics of the according to the governance, the Good Governance Committee. We will do so. We appointed a coordinating member, as it was already explained, and the appointment of this coordinator member is not required, but we do believe it is a very important improvement for the board of directors and in line with the good corporate governance practices. Mr. Johnston, he's just been re-elected for his third mandate as independent director. Mr. Johnston had been until last year the chairman of the audit committee, and because it had been 4 years with this mandate, he had to leave this position, and he's been replaced by Mr. Iglesias with a great professional career, as explained in the Good Governance report. I can also speak about the corporate governance change, the most relevant one, which was the chairman. As you know, the regulations of the board for Acerinox doesn't allow the re-election of a board member beyond being 72, the age of 72. For this reason, our previous chairman, Mr. Rafael Miranda, could not be re-elected as a director, and this put an end to his presidency after 8 years of addressing you from this same table. I cannot end this point without referring to some of the recommendations of the Code of Good Governance, which don't seem to apply. In addition to gender balance, the company doesn't plan to disband the current appointment, remuneration, and corporate governance committee for the simple reason that there would be no content for a new committee in this field. Now, there will be the share retention period for members of top management, including executive directors, be extended for the time being. 1 year seems sufficient, in our opinion, to guarantee the possession of a sufficient number of shares. Now, if we speak about sustainability, I will try to be brief. By the end of 2022, the Sustainability Committee was set up, but previously the group's resources in this area had been pooled around the Sustainability Department. Since its creation, Acerinox has been the benchmark for a circular economy. Long before the name was coined, its activity was already designed around scrap recycling, which is one of its competitive advantages. Since its origin 5 decades ago, It's been a recycler and a reference for circular economy long before this concept was even invented. Recently, as has already been mentioned in the presentations of this board, a series of pilot programs have been launched, which are in fact a continuation of the different plans that since 1970, in the case of the Campo de Gibraltar plant, have been implemented with the aim of reducing consumption, emissions, and discharges. The work of the group's companies in this field has been articulated around a list of objectives and KPIs or main indicators whose essential mission is to enable the monitoring of improvements in all fields. The achievements, in fact only the most relevant ones, can be consulted in our integrated report, consolidated report, which I recommend you to read if you haven't done so, because it's one of the most complete of the IBEX 35 companies and, at least in my opinion, the most pleasant to read. Here you can analyze Acerinox's achievements in this field, the commitments undertaken, and also the various awards received throughout the year in environmental and supply chain matters. It's also possible to know the legal and human rights compliance system that has been implemented and that is being developed day by day by all the people working in our group. The consolidated report contains the statement of non-financial information, which has been verified by an entity of recognized prestige. In the coming years, this report will be subject not only to a review but to a real audit, so the different units of the Acerinox Group are adapting their operations and their reporting levels to these new legal requirements. Mr. Secretary? Well, for the 17th and 18th items of the agenda, they are just for information purposes, so this is why they were not brought to vote. Under the 18th point item of the agenda, information is provided on the modification of the regulations of the board of directors of the company made in February 2023, a change that has been necessary to include the regulation of the position of coordinating independent director, and whose explanatory report has been made available to the shareholders on the occasion of the call of this meeting. In order not to repeat myself, I refer to what has been said in the previous items, and in particular to that of corporate governance. The creation of the position of coordinating independent director has made it necessary to include its regulation in the regulations of the board. For the sake of brevity, shareholders may consult the small reform introduced on the company's web page. So this 18th item on the agenda is also for information purposes, so it's not put to the vote. Well, having read out a summary of the proposed resolutions, I declare the voting period for these proposed resolutions relating to the items on the agenda closed. Once the votes have been counted, I give the floor again to the Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having counted the votes cast on each of the proposed resolutions relating to the items on the agenda, taking into account for these purposes, as I mentioned before, the vote against or abstention expressed prior to the meeting by remote means of communication, the results, and because the meeting has been validly constituted in the second call with enough quorum as according to the legal requirements and for the different items in the agenda, it is sufficient for the proposed resolutions to be approved by a simple majority of the votes of the shareholders, except for the proposed resolutions related to items 7 and 8, concerning the increase in share capital and the delegation of board of directors, because they require absolute majority. The result of the votings have just been given. It is the item first of the agenda. Votes in favor have been received, representing 92.235% of those cast. Item 2 of the agenda, votes in favor were received, representing 92.666%. Third item of the agenda, votes in favor have been received, representing 92.775% of those cast. Item 4 of the agenda, votes in favor have been received, representing 92.159% of those cast. Point 5 of the agenda, in the first section, votes in favor have been received, representing 87.766 in the section 2 of this item. Votes have been received representing 92.149. In item 6 of the agenda, votes in favor were received representing 83.303% of those cast. In item 7, votes in favor were received representing 81.984% of those cast. In item 8, votes in favor are 92.679. Item 9, 92.672% of those cast. Item 10 of the agenda, votes in favor were received, representing 81.555% of those cast. Item 10 of the agenda, votes in favor were received, and they are 9.670% of those cast. In 12th, 82.875. In item 13, votes in favor were received, representing 82.875%. In 14th, 91.323%. And for the rest, no voting was required. In 15 item, votes in favor were received, representing 92.719% of those cast. According to our information, according to the votes cast and counted, shareholders are informed that the number of votes in favor required for the approval of each and every one of the proposed resolutions relating to the different items of the agenda submitted to the vote of this general meeting has been reached. Thank you, Luis. In accordance with the information on record, I declare all these resolutions put to vote to be validly adopted in the terms set out by the Secretary. If you allow, Mr. Chairman, the detailed information about the number of votes in favor, against, and abstentions for every item of the agenda will be published on the website of the company in the next 5 days, according with the Capital Companies Act, and will be included in the minutes drawn up by the notary, which will be considered the minutes of the meeting, and the resolutions contained therein may be executed as of the date of its closing. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Board of Directors and on my own behalf, I would like to say goodbye by thanking all of you once again for your attendance, both in this room and online at this general meeting, and for your commitment to the company. And I declare this meeting formally closed. Thank you very much.